Hey everyone, and welcome to my collection video of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Now this is, of course, an amazing album, and it's also probably my favourite Beatles album if I had to pick one. So I'm quite excited to get going with this collection video. I've got a few interesting pieces to show, so let's get started. Right, so first off, I've got a first mono pressing with the earliest cover variation, and I'll show you that. Okay, so this cover looks the same as any old cover on the front and on the back. However, there is something interesting on the inside, on the gatefold here. Now, in the corner here, it has fourth proof written. Now, I'll explain a little bit about what that means. Now, when the Sgt. Pepper's cover was first designed, obviously there were quite a few different prototypes created for potential different covers for the album, although this was the one that they settled with, and they produced a very limited run of early covers just to make sure that everything was, everything looked right, and obviously they were released, and they all had fourth proof written on the gatefold here, and also slightly further along on the flip back, it has like a serial number here, and that probably just like refers to maybe the font used or something like that, but it's something to do with the prototype. So this is kind of the very, very earliest copy of the cover that was released, and again only in small numbers. Okay, so I'll now show you the vinyl. Here we have the inner sleeve, the psychedelic inner sleeve, which I really like the design of. There's the label, Parlophone label. Sold in the UK and the Gramophone Company Limited. Now, of course, you also get the insert with this album. So here it is, the Sgt. Pepper insert. Now, on the early pressings, it's like a nice dark green on the background, but on the later pressings, it tends to get like a light green. So that's quite an easy way of telling how early your insert is. Okay, so now onto the conventional first pressing mono. And there is something interesting about this cover as well. So here is a very early version of this cover, and it's printed and made by Goward and Lofthouse, and after that it says patents pending. Now, as you know, for the previous albums it was split between Goward and Lofthouse and Ernest J. Day, but obviously Goward and Lofthouse always did like the majority of them, but Ernest J. Day usually did about 10% of each cover. Well, anyway, this was the first album, I think apart from Beatles for Sale, not to be manufactured also by Ernest J. Day. And that is because they won the patents, Goward and Lofthouse, they won that. So, after the very early covers were made, I'll show you a different one. The patents pending was no longer added to the end of printed and made by Goward and Lofthouse Limited. So that's just quite an easy way of telling how early your cover is. But to be honest, I'm sure you could find first pressings with either of those covers. Doesn't really make much difference. Anyway, so let's take a look at the inside of this copy. Now, it doesn't have fourth proof or a catalogue number on the inside of this cover because this is just like the normal version. So that's gone. And let's look at the record. Well, this copy also has the psychedelic inner sleeve, of course. There's that. And here is the record, which is just the same as the last one, because they are both first pressings. And the first pressings for this album have one matrix numbers. Okay, so we are now moving on to the second pressing, which was released in 1968. Now this is quite an interesting one, and also quite a rare one, so I'll show you why that is. Oh, and by the way, here's the comparison between the thin and the wide spine. Well, the copy we are looking at the moment, which is the second pressing, That's on top here, and that has a thin spine. And this was the first pressing with the big wide spine there, so you can really see the difference between the two. There's the inner sleeve again. This one's got somebody's address on and the name of the album. Right, so anyway, here's a copy of the album. Now it looks very similar to the first pressing copy. However, there is one very important difference, and that's located on side 2. Now, I'll give you a second to spot the problem with this one, and it's to do with the tracks, okay? So, look at the song titles for side 2. Have you guessed it? Well, the difference is, it's missing A Day in the Life. There's no A Day in the Life track on there. Now, it is actually on the vinyl, of course, but the label itself does not include that. So, obviously, that's a big mistake. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the third pressing, which is the 1969 press that was sold in the UK. However, I do have something extremely interesting to show. So this is the mono fourth pressing from 1969 until 1970. Now, that means that this is in fact a one-box pressing, but it's a mono. So I'll show you that one. Right, so up to now, all the one boxes I've shown have been stereo. However, for 3 Beatles albums, and those were Please Please Me, Rubber Soul and Sgt. Pepper's, there was a slight overlap when they switched from the yellow and black Parlophone label to the one box in the mono catalogue, and so there's a small number of one box monos released for those 3 albums. Now, they are very difficult to get your hands on actually, and I was very lucky to get this one for a good price, so I'm very pleased. And this is the only one I have of those 3 albums. Anyway, as you can see, it is exactly like the stereo one boxes. However, of course, PMC, it's mono. And here's side 2. And the matrix numbers at the minute are still 1-1. And also, I'd just like to point out a little bonus of this copy of the album actually. Now, I purchased this obviously because of the pressing. You know, I was really happy to get a one box pressing. However, I got it home and I looked at the cover, and on the inside it's another 4th proof cover. So that was double really. I got a nice pressing and another 4th proof cover, so I was very pleased with that one. And here is the mono 5th pressing from 1981 until 1982. Now, unfortunately, there is some sticker damage on side 1, which is another drawback, but oh well, better than nothing I suppose. So, here it is with the all rights as the producer, perimeter text, no sold in the UK, and I'll have to switch over to side 2 to show you this. The mono above the yellow Parlophone there. Okay, so that's the end of the monos, and so we must now move on to the stereos. So here is the first pressing stereo. This copy doesn't have a wide spine. One thing I should have mentioned before actually is that the 4th proof covers are only available in mono, so you can't find any stereo versions of that. And here is the first pressing label, which looks identical to the mono one, but of course stereo. Now, I don't actually have a second pressing of this, but I'll just let you know of the variation anyway. So here's the first pressing, and the only difference is the position of the 2 and also the 1 on the other side is different. So the 2 is going to be somewhere just about above this T here rather than above the S. So that's the only difference. And of course, as I said, the 1 would also be sort of above the T rather than the S. So that's just a minor label variation which I need to find. Right, here is the third pressing from 1969. Now, this particular copy has an error on it, which I'll show you. So here's the 69 pressing, without the soles in the UK. Now the error is on track 4 on side 1, getting better. Getting is misspelt. Of course it should be spelt G-E-T-T-I-N-G, but it's spelt G-E-T-I-I-N-G. So obviously that's a mistake there. And I also have this other copy of exactly the same pressing. However, the getting spelling error has been corrected, so it now reads G-E-T-T-I-N-G. So that's just two different versions you can get of this pressing. Here is the fourth pressing from 69 until 70, which is of course the one box pressing, and of course it's stereo this time with the Gramophone Company Limited text. And side 2. Now this copy is a transition pressing between the 1 box and the 2 box. Now I have a copy like this for With the Beatles, and I have seen a copy like this for Rubber Soul too. So I'll show you this now. So side 1 has the 1 box label, but side 2 has the 2 box label. 1 box and 2 box. And here is the 5th pressing from 1971 until 1973. So here's the 2 box label with the perimeter text beginning with the Gramophone Company Limited. Now this next copy is a Pathé Marconi French copy made during the oil crisis of the mid-70s. So there's the label there. As you can see, everything's spaced out quite weirdly, and also it's got made in France down there. Now here is the 6th pressing from 1976 until 1980. Now this time it has the EMI Records Limited at the start of the perimeter text. And there's side 2. This is the 7th pressing from October 1980 until 1984. And this copy has all rights of the producer, perimeter text, and public performance, broadcasting, copying and hiring. Now I would also like to take this opportunity to show you how the inserts have just changed colour slightly. So this is the one from the 7th pressing from the 80s. And this is the one from the 1st pressing from 1967. Now, as you may be able to see, the originals here are of a slightly darker green to the reissues. Now here is the 8th pressing from 1984 until 1987. Now this variation has wide text. As you can see, everything's a lot wider, and of course has the all rights of the producer on the perimeter text, except now it's copying, hiring, renting and public performance. And now we have the 9th pressing from 1987 until 1991. And this copy has a barcode on the back as well. And here's the label, which is just the same as the last one. And here is the Harlem pressing from 2003, which of course has the Apple logo on the back there, and the barcode which advertises it for the 3 formats. And there's the label with the groove around it. Now, I've got a couple of foreign pressings to show, and the first of those is an original Dutch pressing, and it's a mono copy. And here's the label which I think is very interesting actually, because it's not too similar to the UK one. It's just kind of black and white. Now, it actually has its own version of the psychedelic in the sleeve, although in my opinion it's not as psychedelic as the UK version, but here it is anyway. That's the inner sleeve it comes with. It's got like a similar colour scheme, but you know, probably not as good as the English one. But that's just my opinion. And finally, I've got a copy from Singapore, which is a second pressing from 1970. Now, what makes this interesting is that it's actually got a different track listing to the UK version. Now, what they basically did was they censored this album, and they just took off any tracks they thought kind of had stuff to do with drugs or whatever. So if we go down the track listing, they took off With a Little Help from My Friends, you know, for saying I get high with a little help from my friends, which is stupid if you ask me. Baby You're a Rich Man has also been shoved on there instead of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I suppose that's a slightly more obvious one, but still. And over on side 2, A Day in the Life has been switched with I Am the Walrus. Now, if you're going to take off songs which have something to do with drugs, I'm not sure if I Am the Walrus is maybe the best substitute for that. But oh well. Very interesting, I've got to say. But of course, not as good as the original track listing. And it's on a different version of the one box label, as you can see. And side 2. So this is quite an interesting piece. So that's the end of my Sgt. Pepper's Collection video. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week.